The following podcast is made possible by the generous support of Saba, who sponsors the ongoing series on transforming performance through social. To learn more about Saba, please visit www.saba.com. Welcome, I'm Andrew Bateman, and thank you for joining us for this HCI Podcast, Disrupting the Workplace with Development Technology. Today we are joined by Christine McLeod, the trusted advisor for a growing number of leading businesses that recognize the absolute link between high-performance workplace culture and business growth. She is a speaker, advisor, event producer, and visionary who brings a fresh perspective to employee engagement, connected workplaces, and social businesses. She co-produces Impact 99, Canada's social workplace summit for HR and business leaders who are reinventing their workplaces. It takes place October 2nd in Vancouver and October 23rd in Toronto. She is here to discuss the latest research and topics that were featured in the HCI webcast Transforming Performance with Disruptive People Development Technology, which can be seen on demand at hci.org. Christine, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Let's just dive right into it. What would you say are the biggest issues in people development technology today? And tell us a little bit about your perception of the state of the employee experience with social learning.
Well, I guess to sort of know where we're at today, it's sort of maybe worth pause to think about where we've come from. And where we're emerging from is we're emerging from this world of e-learning and moving into this world of social learning. And e-learning has always been sort of taking a bunch of content and delivering it online. It's been event-based, it's been expensive to create, and more than anything else, I think sometimes why it doesn't stick is it's missing the interaction with others, which is really most of how we learn. Very little of how we learn and retain is actually sitting in a classroom absorbing content. And so what's happening in the world of social learning is we're now including people. We're now allowing participants to be self-directed. We're infusing sort of all of the rest of what happens day to day, which is learning as you go, into people's workday. So people are not learning as an event. They're learning in more bite-sized pieces, and they're learning interactively with their peers.
Now, much of your presentation was built on the premise of Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. How can this concept assist organizations in determining where they could apply disruptive people development technology?
Well, I was really amazed when we did the webcast, actually. Very few people had read the book and much less actually seen the TED Talk. So the easiest thing that I would recommend is if people have not seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk entitled Start With Why, I would definitely watch it. It's about 20 minutes long, but it really, the premise is he talks about this golden circle. He talks about this idea that in the middle, if you could picture just a very plain circle with the word why in the middle, is when you start something, when you're trying to move change forward, when you're trying to make things happen, when you're trying to make decisions, we forget to start with the why. We forget to start with what is it that we're trying to do? Why does this matter? So as far as people development technology and disruptive people development technology, what I would suggest to leaders is that they actually start with what is your core purpose as a company? So why do you exist? That's the biggest why. And this isn't just your mission statement that's on a wall, but really just spending some time thinking about, why do I matter to my customers? Why do I matter to my employees? So that is a really fundamental place to start. And the next thing that I need to think about when I'm thinking about why is, why do employees need to learn what it is that I want them to learn? So we have a ton of content that we create. We have all these learning programs and all the rest, but why is it that I want them to learn? What is it that they're going to do differently once they learn what it is that I want them to learn? And so I think once we start with that fundamental why and start with a more user-centric approach, an employee-centric or customer-centric at the ultimate end, is then the next thing we need to do is we need to move to the next circle. So if you can picture an outer ring outside the why and put the word how in there. How am I going to deliver this content in a way that is meaningful to the employee, in a way that is going to be able to be meaningful when they need it, how they need it, to be able to act on the information? So spending a bit of time thinking about how I'm going to think differently knowing what I know about learning, that it doesn't happen in a classroom and it's not event-based, how can I rethink my learning strategy? And then the third thing, if you can picture another circle outside of the how and title that one what, now I start thinking about what specifically do I want them to act on once they've learned? What is it that I'm going to measure? What is it I'm going to look for that's going to be different behavior? And so as we think about learning strategy, I think when we first start with this bigger why, and then we move to how, then we get into really cool opportunities to explore new ways of learning. It's really important to finish with not only what is it that I'm going to teach them, but what is it that I'm going to look for differently? And I think we miss that sometimes in learning, is really being able to measure results.
Now, you incorporated a poll about how often HR leaders think about ROI, and to our surprise, the results came in close to a 50-50 split. So what does this tell you about the core issues of human capital management as it relates to using disruptive technology to assist in talent development?
Well, it actually was in some ways not surprising to me to hear that score, but at the same time, it's sort of why I shake my head so often, because I think about other professions, and if it's marketing or sales or, the finance department, very rarely do we make decisions without actually knowing what the ROI is going to be on the potential outcome. And yet in HR, I still feel like so much of what we do is soft. We're not able to actually show a direct correlation between what it is that we're changing or what it is that we're implementing and have, a specific ROI. What I think the technology in social learning that is emerging is allowing us to do is actually to be much more at our fingertips, having the ability to look at dashboards, personal dashboards, how long people were on a course, how much they then kind of changed a particular metric after that. So because when you look at social learning, it's employee-driven, you're actually on the back end able to almost see the employee thought process. You're able to see their learning process and their learning patterns in a different way.
On our webcast, it seemed like our audience was really curious about getting buy-in from business leaders on reinventing the workplace through new technology. In particular, how can small, incremental changes in daily processes help to shift organizational culture from one devoid of social learning technology to an enterprise where the use of that technology becomes much more pervasive?
Well, I would say, I think I heard last year some statistic that the learning industry is a $300 billion industry. So you think about how much we spend on learning every year, every quarter, every department that we have. If we start to think about that concept, that how much we spend individually as an organization, if we start to move away from thinking of bigger events, where we have to have people in a seat traveling to a particular place, and we start thinking about how we can incorporate technology into the day-to-day flow of an employee's workday. So whether we're delivering content on a mobile phone, whether we're activating sort of social learning through collaborative platforms, whether we are using technology to actually creating learning in different ways. So even if you were to help people understand how to use, for example, Google Hangout, that they could learn from each other in real time or on chat or through, small bite-sized gamified learning. That all of these different kind of shifts help us move from thinking of these big event-based learning, which we typically think of orientation, strategic planning sessions, and leadership retreats, quarterly meetings, annual sales meetings, or whatever kind of meetings that you have annually. Let's start thinking about how we can actually leverage the technology that for the most part is in people's hands with their smartphone, or at the very least on their desktop or laptop, and how can we deliver a little bit more ongoing content in smaller bite size.
So to wrap this up, what are some trends that you see happening now, and where do you see human capital management headed as more organizations begin to apply people development technology?
There's a couple of things that I'm seeing as I talk to my HR network, senior business leaders in my network, people who attend our conference, and these are some of the things that I've sort of heard from firsthand knowledge of people who are in organizations is what they're seeing. Much more of a user-driven approach. So employees are actually driving the content that not only in some cases that's being produced, but also what they want to consume. So much more personalized learning. The second is much more bite-sized learning and in many cases gamified learning. So allowing people to achieve particular targets or reach a certain level and then unlock something different. So a little bit of competition, not only personally to be able to continually exceed, but also against your peers. So that's something else. And the third is on demand. So not only people accessing what they want to learn, but also when they want to learn it. So those are things that I'm seeing kind of on the employee side of things. On the back end side of things, much greater visibility into the whole picture of how the employee learns. So not only what course do they finish, but also who are they connected to in the organization? Where does the informal learning happen? How influential are they in the organization? What are they contributing in terms of content of their own? Many organizations are starting to move a little bit more towards a coaching approach or a peer-to-peer mentoring approach. Even organizations as large as IBM are implementing global peer mentoring networks. So we're starting to think about learning as much more of a person-to-person rather than just a content being consumed.
Well, thank you so much, Christine, for a great conversation. For more information, please visit Christine's new website at christinemcleod.ca. This concludes this edition of the HCI Podcast, but be sure to catch new HCI Podcasts every Monday and Thursday. You can now hear HCI Podcasts on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, and Stitcher Smart Radio. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Saba, for making this possible, and remind listeners to join us on the web at hci.org for more information on this and other topics.